We're returning to a page from the Codex Mendoza, that 16th century book that was created with the underlying purpose of being able to record tribute, to understand the tribute patterns that the Aztecs held over the people that they had conquered. On the left, we have one of the pages that documents tribute. I'd like you to see that it is designed largely with Aztec pictographs. Okay, these are Aztec artists working for the Spanish. Text has been added, but that's a Spanish translation. There are 71 pages in this codex, in this book, all created in native style by native artists, but on European paper and bound into a European book, intended to be sent to Spain. It initially recorded not just tribute, but also the history of the Aztecs up to the conquest, and it's valuable in particular because it also records the daily life of the Aztecs. The page that I've selected, though, is to focus on tribute. Without translating, I think we can get a rough idea of some of the things that we're looking at. Along the top row up here, I do think that we have a series of feathers. Feathers were incredibly valuable to the Aztecs. They were used by the elite in decoration, for mantles, for headdresses, and also the soldiers, the elite soldiers, as we'll see, wore them in their regalia. Up in the corner, I think we can all work this one out. This is a turtle. The turtle would be an item that you could put on the menu for the meat of the animal, but also the shell itself could be useful. There is another bird that is included. I don't know what bird it is. If it's big enough, it could be eaten. If it's not, then it would be useful, I think, for its feathers. And two prizes would be these jaguar pelts located right here. Those would be objects for the elite. The nobility would wear those, and they would be restricted. In fact, no one else could be able to afford them, but would be able to be allowed to wear them as well. I think it is important to stress that the Aztecs did run a conquest state. They were military conquerors, and as a result, they had a hardened view of reality and what was expected of a soldier in society. They did, through conquest, bring city-states into a submissive position of tribute. The tribute was redistributed in the Aztec Empire once it was collected, but this tribute was really burdensome, and it did include food, raw materials, and in particular it also included slaves for purposes of sacrifice largely. The collection of tribute was regulated by the calendar so that the Aztecs could meet the needs of religious festivals and be able to offer the sacrifices and perform the rituals with the regalia that was needed for the special festival at hand, dictated by the calendar. The captives that were taken, they were collected on the battlefield, and one of the premier ways of advancing as a warrior on the battlefield was to be able to collect a living captive. So when you went out to fight, it was not your goal to kill somebody. It was your goal to capture someone, to bring that individual back. The political organization of the Aztecs then was based on conquest. It incorporated control over a number of city-states. The Aztecs located garrisons in strategic locations throughout the empire, but they did not occupy the city-states. They also made a tremendous mistake by not trying to assimilate the people that they conquered. As a result of that, the conquered areas, the conquered peoples, and the city-states remained not Aztec, and in fact they resented the huge burden of tribute that the Aztecs require. Why is that important? Because when the Spanish come in and Cortez needs more soldiers, when he needs help, where's he going to go? He's going to go to the people who were paying tribute to the Aztecs, to the subjugated city-states of the Aztecs, and these folks are willingly going to join Cortez without understanding that the destruction of the Aztecs will lead to destruction of their own city-states as well. The piece that is on the right is from another codex, and it's simply to illustrate that there was a record of sacrifice that was recorded by the Spaniards, again using Aztec artists to do the images. The premier method of human sacrifice, and there were several, was to cut into the chest and remove the still beating heart. The body often then would be rolled down the pyramid, and we'll take a look at that as we progress. Okay. This is one of the Aztec images, pretty powerful images, that is created in fired clay. It is a life-sized figure coming in around 5.5 feet in height, and it's an eagle knight. It depicts a very elite group of warriors, a special infantry class in the Aztec army that would be foot soldiers, essentially. This elite military group was largely from the elite members of society. It was possible, however, if you were a commoner and you were extraordinarily skilled, to be able to climb up the ladder and become one of these elite knights. You had to, however, be extremely skilled on the battlefield, and you also had to be among the bravest. The way this was documented was by counting the number of captives who were taken alive on the battlefield. The more captives that you were able to obtain, the more fearsome a reputation you were acquiring as a warrior, and this was displayed in the costume that you earned your way to wear on the battlefield. The eagle warriors were also referred to as soldiers of the sun. And if you think about eagles as great birds, powerful and strong, capable of flying in the sky, I think you could figure out that they would make relatively reasonable symbols of the sun. But there's also one myth that is part of Aztec history and religion that talks about two gods who were willing to sacrifice themselves to empower the sun, to give the sun energy, to give the sun life. And they jumped into a fire, giving up their own life to support the sun. When they arose out of the fire, they were reborn in the form of eagles and the other elite group of warrior jaguars. So this links the soldier, in fact, to the religion of the Aztecs, and war for the Aztecs in many ways actually was religious. The person who became an eagle warrior would wear this regalia proudly, and it would automatically intimidate your enemy on the battlefield. Just taking a look at this for style, I would like you to see the geometric regularity of the figure. There's a smoothness, diminished amount of details. It's also very formal. In particular, I'm talking about symmetry, and this is one of the features of Aztec art. The details, the claws, the beaks, the wings, are incorporated in a simplified but rhythmic manner to add power to the piece and to suggest a kind of threatening quality associated with our warrior. It is also a piece that is somewhat hard-hitting, intended to be powerful, and therefore appropriate to a warrior aristocracy. The individual is shown here with his hands up tauntly in the position of flight. It's as if the individual warrior is about to actually take flight on the battlefield. The talons of the eagle shown midway up his leg, also poised to grab his enemy, and his head emerges from the beak, which is the headdress that the warrior wears on the battlefield. So he actually takes on the power of the eagle, and I think it's safe to say he becomes the eagle. Again, warriors gain their success and their rank and achieve merit and advance in the military profession by taking live captives. And the symbolism of their success will be conveyed through the regalia, the costuming that the warrior is given as he is promoted through the ranks. This is from another codex, and it is a depiction of Eagle Warrior, an Eagle Warrior, the one that's shown on the left. I'd like you to see again the costume that the warrior is wearing, complete with excuse me, the beak of the eagle head wrapping around his face. He also has the most elaborate of the costumes of the three individuals. You can see the other two have not yet achieved the rank of Eagle Warrior. They will if they persist and show their bravery and their skill on the battlefield. You can determine that by the costuming, by the amount of feathers that would be shown, and you can see that up above in the standard that the warrior's carrying. You can also, as you look at our warriors, see that each and every one of them has one of the typical Aztec weapons, which is a stick of wood which has obsidian embedded into it. And that would be along the edges, essentially, of the shaft of wood that the warrior is carrying. This would be successful in assisting the warrior in capturing a live captive on the battlefield. This is not a weapon that was, in fact, intended to kill. So what do we do with the captives when we have captured them on the battlefield? They will be brought back to the great city, and they will be offered as a sacrifice on the temple top, and then their bodies will be generally rolled down the form of the pyramid, which itself resembles a mountain. Okay, this is 35-4, the one that is on our right side. It is located in O'Reilly, and it's the Great Temple, or the Temple Mayor. What I think O'Reilly wanted you to see is that, in fact, it's more than one temple. What the Aztecs and other people in Mesoamerica tended to do was to encase an earlier temple with a new addition, to sheathe it in a new and splendorous design on the outside. In other words, never knocking down the old building, but simply enhancing it, and at the same time maintaining the earlier structure. What this allowed the Aztecs to do was to acknowledge their claim that was the right to rule based upon the past. It also, of course, is a site that was tremendously spiritual because it was a temple that had been used by generations before. So you encase it and you maintain and enhance that spiritual power. Next to the Great Temple, which in fact is a double temple to the god of rain and to the sun god of the Aztecs, there was a ball court, and there also was a skull rack, at least one, actually more than one. The skull rack, and that's located right down here, is where human heads detached from the bodies of the sacrificial victims could have been placed in commemoration of the act of sacrifice itself. The pyramid form is a reference in this case to a specific mountain. The pyramid shape and form in Mesoamerica is incredibly ancient, going back to the first high civilizations. But in this case, for the Aztecs, it is a reference to Coatepec, which is a very sacred mountain for the Aztecs because it is the site where the sun is going to defeat the moon, and as a result of this, light will triumph over darkness. That takes us essentially to the point where we really need to talk a little bit about Aztec religion to understand the goals of the Aztecs.